Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Art DiBenedetto, Superintendent of Schools, here to give you a little bit of an update with my excellent Assistant Superintendent.
Joe Piccirillo, nice to see you.
What an interesting year and a half it's been. Just when you think it can't get any more nutty, things get more nutty. So here we are, talking about the possibility of reopening our schools full-time for our students. We were encouraged when the coding for the COVID virus reverted back to yellow, which meant that we're in a lot better shape than we were when it was both red and then orange. And we saw this as a significant sign, and we had been lightly planning the return, but as soon as they hit yellow, we put it into high gear. We essentially met with our principals, we talked to our teachers union, we talked to parents. We got a lot of input with a lot of different ideas. Our biggest factor was to understand if the doability of reopening could take place. We had the principals in our room. What you see behind me essentially is a brainstorming board where I asked principals to please explain what were the obstacles towards a full-time reopening. They were not shy. They too had spoken to their staff. So we had great amounts of input, and we needed to, A, identify the problems, and then we met 2 days later to ascertain if these problems could be overcome. I am very confident that each and every item, some of which are more complicated than others, I'm very confident that they have been met head on by the principals and their staff. We've given them assistance when necessary, and I believe that we are very close to being very comfortable with the reopening situation. Joe, why don't you take one of the obstacles and talk about the thinking that went into just tackling that one particular item?
Sure. Well, I mean, some of these things are the circumstances that existed when we had to shut everything down. Some of it has changed, and I was just mentioning this to Mr. Fitzpatrick a second ago. When we first had to deal with the COVID protocols, lunch was a major obstacle for us. How can several children have lunch together? They're going to have to take their masks off, this is obvious. How could they do that safely? Well, when we were in the middle of winter, this was more difficult because we could not utilize some of our outside spaces. But now that spring is upon us,
even though it's 24 degrees out.
Yes, we're hopeful that when we do announce that we're going full day, that we'll be able to utilize some of the outside spaces, which will make us able to distance, but also allow for more of that ventilation. So that's a small practical reason why soon will be a better time than would have been in the middle of winter. And there's a couple additional factors that make this time a little bit safer for us. One, Mr. D's talking about the change in the level. We were once red, we were then orange, we were briefly yellow, and we're back to orange. But at least we're starting to see us come a little bit further down on the level of concern, right, from a spreading standpoint. Number two, vaccines, the opportunity for vaccines has expanded. The governor came out saying March 15th, all educators and school employees could get the vaccine, and then he even bumped it up sooner and said immediately. And then you saw it was all over the Twitter sphere of different educators getting vaccines over the weekend. So this is beneficial. Number three, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine that was just approved is a single shot vaccine. So before, we were waiting for teachers to get 2 doses of that shot. Some, I think the Moderna was over a 5-week span. That can lead us to have to wait a long time. And then you're waiting 2 weeks after that 5-week span. So it's really 2 months between your first shot and when you're fully immune. Now with the Johnson & Johnson, it's going to be quicker. So all of these things kind of pieced together, I think, have given us a really good opportunity to open now where we couldn't before. And there's one last point of clarification. Mr. D talks about we're prepared soon, and he'll tell you more about the timeline, to open full-time. Some people that are watching this might say, well, I was pretty sure Hopatcong, at least with the little ones, has been open full-time for a very long time. I want to clarify this. When we say full-time, we're talking about every day in person and a full day in person. So while, yes, we had kids every day in person, in some instances for a long period of time, they were shortened days. So there was no lunch period. Right now we've expanded it, so this will be a full day like you've always understood schools to run, minus there will be masks still on kids.
We understand that if the weather is challenging, Joe's mention of outdoors has some difficulties to it, but beautifully, our biggest lunch difficulty is at the middle school, and they have a canopied area outside. So as long as the temperature is appropriate, we can still use the outside item for lunch. And that's a good example that Joe picked, because it's different at each school, and the principals have done an excellent job in customizing our general umbrella plan to the specifics of their building. And I'm very, very, very thankful for their work on this. Recess was another issue. Social distancing. There's a word up on the board behind me over to the right or to the left, depending upon which way you're looking at it. Practicable. We continue to go by the stance that social distancing is something that's done when it is practicable. If the state or the federal government were to say social distancing of 6 feet must be enforced, we will not reopen. That would be a step backwards from their prior guidance. That is always a potential concern in my head.
And I think when you say practicable, I think there's a lot of people that have heard us use this term, and perhaps we never fully defined it. So it's important to define terms, right? So practicable, the way I see this means we are going to, in good faith, do our very best to see if we can create an environment where there is 6-foot social distancing. In some instances, this is not something that we could do without, I don't want to say impossible, but without putting incredible strain on different resources within the school, right? I want you to know this, we do take efforts to distance. For example, the high school, we know there are some courses that if all kids were to come back to school, and I'll talk about this in a second, would be very tight. In those situations, we have met with the high school principal, and we've come up with solutions where we can ease the amount of students in that room at a given time, using different other classrooms to have some students in. So I want you to understand, we're not just saying, well, that's not going to happen. We're not doing that 6 foot. That's not how we approach this. We look at it in good faith and try to find the best way that we can do it to the extent possible. That's what practicable means to me. And I just mentioned I would come back to this. When we announce that we will go full day, I still believe that a large, maybe is not the right word, but a substantial percentage of students will continue to opt to attend school from home. This could be 30% of our student body. So a course that might have had 20 students, and you might think, gee, that's going to be very tight, may in actuality not have 20 students in that classroom. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's also possible that once we announce students will be coming back full-time, some people may opt to go, they may opt to go back to virtual rather than continue in person. So these are all things that we'll have to see how they play out, but they do impact how we approach the distancing and how we approach different obstacles we might face.
There has been a pattern of returning from virtual learning to live learning in the recent weeks, especially at the upper grades. We tended to have a lot higher percentage of kindergarten or first grade children in school than we did high school kids. But even that is beginning to switch. The high school is reporting more and more people coming back from virtual. Of course, there will still be a virtual option. However, once we come back, there will be a period of time where you stay live or you stay virtual. Every time a family switches a child from one to the other, it involves paperwork and it involves record keeping, et cetera, et cetera. We believe that we will manage this, but we will have our hands full. Remember, when I got here, there was 14 or 15 administrators. We're down to about 8 or 9, okay? We can't do things as quickly as we used to. We will do them with efficiency, but I can't have people switching back and forth. It just, right then, it takes up a little too much time.
So tell us, we're all waiting, when are we coming back full time?
We're coming back full time when the code for the virus demonstrates 3 consecutive weeks of yellow. We had originally looked at April 12th as a definite date, but then last week it went from yellow to orange again, and I need my staff to feel a level of comfort and safety. I need the children in our schools, the families, to have that same level of comfort and safety. And as much as I would like to get kids back full-time today, but I have learned that sometimes a conservative approach towards things allows people to feel that they've been heard, and that is one of the most important tenets of my being, that people are heard. They might not always be agreed with, but they are listened to, understood, and heard. And we have successfully gone through a year of craziness because our teaching staff has risen to the occasion. They did things that they've never done before. I am very proud of them. I am very proud of the manner in which the union and the administration interact with each other. There is a constant communication and open door, and we have not had some of the difficulties that have kept districts shut down across the state. So I am very thankful for that. On Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. at Hopatcong High School in the gym, there will be a single issue meeting on the topic of reopening. We will give specific details for specific schools on the items that you see behind me. I am hopeful that this meeting is well attended because of all the single issue meetings we've had, this is the most vital topic.